So what I want to do is give you a sense of what we know so far, and then tell you as much as I can about our past contact with the killer. We are going through the killer's life, as I said, especially his electronics, to understand as much as we can about his path and whether there was anyone else involved, either in directing him or in assisting him. So far, we see no indication that this was a plot directed from outside the United States, and we see no indication that he was part of any kind of network. It is also not entirely clear at this point just what terrorist group he aspired to support, although he made clear his affinity at the time of the attack for ISIL and generally leading up to the attack for radical Islamist groups. He made 911 calls from the club during the attack at about 2:30 in the morning, Sunday morning. And there were 3 different calls. He called and he hung up. He called again and spoke briefly with the dispatcher, and then he hung up. And then the dispatcher called him back again, and they spoke briefly. So there were 3 total calls. During the calls, he said he was doing this for the leader of ISIL, who he named and pledged loyalty to, but he also appeared to claim solidarity with the perpetrators of the Boston Marathon bombing and solidarity with a Florida man who died as a suicide bomber in Syria for al-Nusra Front, a group in conflict with the so-called Islamic State. The bombers at the Boston Marathon and the suicide bomber from Florida were not inspired by ISIL, which adds a little bit to the confusion about his motives. And of course, we're working to understand what role anti-gay bigotry may have played in motivating this attack, an attack that occurred during the very month when we recognize and celebrate our LGBT brothers and sisters. Again, it's early. We're working hard to understand the killer and his motives and his sources of inspiration. But we are highly confident that this killer was radicalized, and at least in some part through the internet.